Lyris always called the human stories childish tales spread by smugglers and drifters. They said the humans had vanished centuries ago, sealing their worlds behind a forbidden line called the Terran boundary. She had laughed at it during Academy. Debates saying no species could hide forever in a galaxy mapped by empires. She was a young envoy now assigned to the frontier planet Vera Prime, where a ceasefire ceremony was meant to calm skirmishes between her empire and smaller border colonies. The hall shimmered with banners and hollow light. The air smelled of metal and heat outside storm clouds crawled across the horizon, and the ground trembled softly from distant drills. No one noticed at first when the comm feeds flickered a whisper, threaded through the static, unidentified object inbound vector unknown altitude climbing fast. The words repeated again and again until even the guards looked at one another, unease creeping through their posture. Lyris frowned, thinking it another pirate trick, but then every sensor screen dimmed except one feed, a deep-frequency transmission. Not Empire-coded, not from any registry. The voice that spoke was calm, almost polite. "This is Starborn Command Vessel. Resolute, evacuate civilians immediately. Stand down weapons and clear the sky." The crowd fell silent. The diplomats glanced at each other, waiting for someone to laugh. Yet the tone carried no threat, only certainty. Then the ceiling lights failed for a moment, and through the transparent dome of the ceremony hall they saw it. A shadow cutting across the storm, a moving mountain of blackened metal shaped like a spear with veins of light crawling along its hull. It passed without sound, but the gravity meters spiked the ships of the Empire orbiting above blinked on sensors, then vanished one by one. No explosion, no flame, only gone. People screamed. Lyris ran to the command deck shouting for connection lines to the orbit fleet, but static filled every channel. A colonel barked orders to scramble interceptors, but their engines refused ignition. Electromagnetic fields locked them cold outside. The shadow slowed, hovering beyond the atmosphere plates, shifted along its hull, forming a single glowing emblem. A broken circle with 3 stars inside the mark of the lost Terrans. Her breath caught as realization settled. This was no myth. This was human. And they were here. On the observation screens, the shadow released thousands of small lights. They fell like slow rain, illuminating the city below, but instead of bombs, they settled into the air as drones scanning buildings and marking escape routes through emergency channels. The human voice returned again. "This sector lies within the Oath boundary. Civilians are to be unharmed. Move to the evacuation corridors, do not resist." Lyris heard people asking what oath, what boundary. The Empire officers screamed to shoot the drones, but none of their weapons powered up human interference fields had turned them to scrap. She stood, frozen, watching the light fall across the square, her mind replaying the old Academy jokes. Humans were supposed to be extinct or primitive hermits hiding in dead systems. Yet here was a ship that silenced fleets and guided civilians instead of killing them. She looked at the child beside her, a refugee girl named Rhea. Clutching a medallion, the girl whispered softly, "Are those angels?" Lyris shook her head, unsure of the answer. The colonel grabbed her arm and shouted that she must broadcast. A counter-message: declare imperial authority, hold the people together. But his voice sounded small against the hum building in the air. Then across the horizon, another light rose, faint and blue, forming words written through clouds like fire. "Oath, Sector 0. Trespass confirmed, stand down for retribution." The message burned before fading, leaving the sky bruised and alive with static. She felt the floor vibrate again as the great ship moved away toward orbit, but the tremor left in her chest remained. The humans had spoken not with boasts or rage, but with calm control, and she realized that every laugh, every dismissal had been ignorance hiding fear. If the legends were true, then the Empire had crossed a line. No one survived crossing. Night fell quickly, thunder rolling over the plains as evacuation sirens wailed in the distance. Lyris looked once more toward the dark sky and saw a streak of silver break through clouds before vanishing. She whispered to herself, humans were real, and they were watching. The next dawn would no longer belong to the Empire. It would belong to whoever remembered the oath first. The Empire reacted with pride wounded deeper than any weapon within hours of the Starborn ship's appearance. The High Command declared it an act of aggression and ordered a retaliatory strike. Fleets scrambled from nearby sectors filled with commanders, eager to prove human myths still powerless. Lyris watched them depart from Veriprime's upper station, the hangar trembling, as dreadnoughts launched into the storm clouds, leaving behind a sky filled with static. She tried to convince herself that humanity could not have survived unchanged after centuries in isolation. Yet she could not forget the precision of the drones. The quiet warning, the strange calm in that human voice. She had mocked the legends, but now they lingered inside her like a heartbeat that refused to fade. Hours later, the first fleet report arrived, only fragments leaking through jumbled transmissions. Weapons locked, controls frozen, target unresponsive, shadows on sensors before silence returned. The admirals blamed faulty systems, refusing to admit defeat. They sent another task group under the Empire's decorated officer, Commander Valor, whose arrogance was matched only by his certainty that no primitive world could challenge Imperial power. Lyris was ordered to accompany him as envoy and witness a political move meant to keep human contact under observation. She stepped aboard the command ship, Nemathis feeling the cold of the deck seep into her boots. The crew treated her presence with formality, hiding the fear behind rigid salutes and hollow smiles. When the Nemathis reached the outer rim of Vera's orbit, the stars looked strange, distorted as if space itself bent around something invisible. Scanners registered nothing but static, yet the human signal pulsed faintly across all bands, repeating a single line. "Do not cross the oath boundary. Civilians will be protected, Lyris." Listen to it on loop, its tone steady like a heartbeat. She thought of the child Rhea still on the surface under Imperial evacuation. Her promise to keep the girl safe, now tangled with orders she could not question. Valor laughed when he heard the message, calling it a weak bluff from desperate survivors. He ordered his fleet forward, ignoring every warning beacon. Moments later, the night around them, fractured sensors screamed readings. Impossible, gravitational fields fluctuating like ocean tides. The human ship appeared not from hyperspace but from the dark itself, as if light decided to reveal what had always been there. The Starborn ship hung above them, vast and silent, its hull reshaping like a living thing. No weapons fired, no aggressive posture, just presence. Valor barked commands to open fire. The crew hesitated until his voice cracked through their hesitation. Launch. Everything, all batteries at once. Missiles streaked out toward the target, but halfway through flight, they broke, apart, falling harmlessly in glittering trails of dust. Lyris felt her heart twist as every console died again, one by one. The Empire ships drifted powerless as the Starborn broadcast flickered through their dead comms. "We warned you. Stand down. Return. Beyond the line, this is your final mercy." Valor slammed his fist into the console, spitting curses he swore to prove the Terrans mortal, even if it meant losing everything. He ordered a ground detachment to attack the remaining civilian shelters, claiming the humans would not strike if civilians were used as cover. Lyris followed the shuttle convoy down through storms, seeing cities still half-lit by drone lights guiding evacuation lines. She stepped out into chaos, soldiers shouting refugees, crying, and through it all the drones hovered steady, emitting faint blue light, marking paths away from conflict. One Imperial officer aimed at them and fired, but the blast curved mid-air, striking his own weapon. The drones reacted faster than thought. Lyris ran toward the main square where the girl Rhea waited beside a column of children, trembling as soldiers surrounded them. She shouted to stop, but her voice was lost in thunder. Then the sky split open again, the Starborn ship descending lower. Then before clouds burned away, revealing its vast underbelly covered in shifting runes of light. No explosion came. No sound, only a pulse of energy that disarmed every weapon within miles. Soldiers froze, staring upward as their rifles powered down. The ship's broadcast filled the air again. "This city is under protection. Withdraw immediately or face consequence." Lyris watched as even the Empire banners flickered under the radiation hum. The colonel in charge ordered retreat for the first time since the Empire's founding. He looked afraid. Rhea tugged Lyris's sleeve, pointing at the glowing hull, whispering, "They saved us, didn't they?" Lyris could not speak. She felt shame swelling in her chest for every time she had laughed at old myths about Terrans who fought to protect what others destroyed. The sky above shimmered as the Starborn lifted back into orbit, leaving behind silence and faint rain. Lyris stood among fallen banners and broken weapons, realizing the Empire's power meant nothing against a will that did not seek domination, but balance. She looked toward the distant horizon where the human ship vanished, thinking that maybe mercy could be more terrifying than any weapon she had ever known. Days passed since the Starborn ship vanished into the upper dark, yet the air on Vera Prime still trembled as if its engines had left echoes across the atmosphere. The Empire declared victory through propaganda channels, claiming the human vessel fled before their might. But no soldier who had seen the sky that night believed. Those words Lyris remained grounded by Imperial order, confined to a command post near the evacuated city. Her reports censored before leaving the planet. She read the official statements written by men who had not seen the ship's shadow. They spoke of ghosts and malfunctions in experimental pirate tech. None mentioned the Terran voice that guided civilians, or the strange mercy that had spared everyone. Below, Commander Valor returned in disgrace, his fleet reduced to drifting wrecks that had never been attacked in the conventional sense. They had simply stopped working. Power cells drained, systems locked, navigation erased, as if the universe itself refused to let them move. He arrived furious but strangely quiet. The first thing he did was summon Lyris to his quarters. The chamber smelled of burnt metal and recycled air. He looked pale, his eyes hollow behind the golden insignia on his chest. He asked her what she had seen when the ship descended, what she thought of the humans. His tone was not mocking now. It carried a hint of fear. Lyris told him what she remembered, how the ship had warned them, how it targeted weapons, but left people alive. Valor listened in silence before saying that fear was a weapon, and that humans had mastered it long before the Empire ever learned to fight. In the days that followed, small craft from the Empire searched the debris fields, finding fragments of unknown alloys that resisted scanning. Their technicians reported strange data feedback loops whenever they tried to analyze the pieces. Some collapsed into dust. Others emitted low frequencies that caused vertigo. Lyris overheard whispers among the crew that the Starborn were not only soldiers, but engineers of gravity and light-wielding physics as others wield blades. She began collecting what little information she could, salvaging broken comm logs and personal recordings from soldiers who had witnessed the encounter. Most described the same feeling, a deep quiet in their minds, as if the human presence erased all noise around them. When orders arrived from Central Command, Valor's fleet was instructed to regroup at the orbital station and prepare another demonstration. This time they would capture proof of the humans' existence to control the narrative and show the Empire's dominance. Lyris was again assigned as envoy to record events for the Imperial Council. But something inside her shifted. She no longer wanted to witness conquest. She wanted to understand what the Starborn Oath truly meant. During a briefing, she asked Valor directly what the oath was. He froze for a moment before replying that it was a legend among border worlds that claimed humanity swore never to attack first and never to allow others to enslave free species within certain regions of space. He laughed after saying it, but the sound lacked conviction. The fleet departed once more, this time toward the edge of the Oath boundary, a silent zone where ships disappeared. Without explanation, scanners showed a field of derelict vessels drifting in perfect alignment like tombstones of forgotten wars. Valor ordered them to proceed. Lyris stood at the observation deck as the stars outside distorted colors, bending into waves, and for a moment she felt pressure against her chest like the pull of deep ocean currents. Then a faint glow appeared ahead. Not a star, but a structure. A floating ring made of unknown material, rotating slowly with lines of blue energy pulsing. Along its surface, the crew called it a gate, but no known warp technology matched its design. As they approached the ring, every console flickered to life with human script unknown to most of them. But Lyris somehow recognized fragments of it from the old myths. It translated roughly as boundary of peace, do not cross armed intent, detected return beyond this point. Valor dismissed the message and ordered full advance engines roaring against the silence. Suddenly alarms blared. Gravitational readings off the charts. The gate opened, releasing a burst of white light that swallowed the lead ships within seconds. When the brightness faded, nothing remained of them. No explosion, no wreckage, only empty coordinates. Lyris gripped the console, struggling to breathe as the ship shook violently. The human voice echoed through comms, again steady and sorrowful. You were warned. Stand down, or the oath will be fulfilled. Valor screamed to jam the signal, But the crew hesitated. None wanted to. Challenge the calm certainty of that tone outside the hull shimmered as if reality itself flexed under unseen weight, and through it emerged the same ship as before, the Starborn Resolute, rising from the light of the gate. Silent as death, Lyris stared. Through the glass, unable to move, her heartbeat sinking with the low hum vibrating through the floor. She realized the ship was not here to destroy them. It was guarding the gate. Something vast and ancient pulsed behind that portal. Something the humans were willing to protect even from themselves. She felt a sudden clarity. The legends were never about war. They were warnings. Humanity had not vanished. They had chosen to stand watch over something that no empire should ever touch. And now, she understood that every myth, every laugh, every denial was built to hide a truth too heavy for pride to bear. The moment the Starborn Resolute emerged from the glowing gate, the Empire fleet froze, the crew of every ship staring at their screens, in disbelief as the colossal Terran vessel drifted forward in absolute silence. Its surface rippling like water touched by wind. It carried no visible weapons, no shields, no escorts. Yet its presence alone filled the void with pressure that made hearts stutter and machines hum off rhythm. Commander Valor stood on the bridge of the Namath, his hands shaking even as he barked orders to target and fire. But the words were hollow. The targeting systems refused his command. Every weapon remained. Cold and unresponsive, he turned toward Lyris, demanding answers. Yet she had none. She could only watch the movement of light across the Terran hull, like veins carrying power through a living organism. Then came the transmission. Not a threat. Not an ultimatum, only a simple line spoken in that calm, steady human tone. You have crossed the oath boundary. Leave this place immediately, or accept responsibility for what follows. Valor spat on the floor and shouted for manual override, ordering navigation. To ram the Terran ship to prove that the Empire would never yield. The crew hesitated, their fingers trembling above the controls. Lyris saw the fear in their eyes. They had all heard the same voice inside their minds, like a whisper behind the broadcast, as if the human captain spoke directly into their thoughts, warning them one last time before it was too late. When the Namathis surged forward, thrusters burning blue, the space between them and the Resolute shimmered a thin veil like air turning to glass. The Empire ship hit it and everything stopped. The engine screamed, but no movement followed the entire vessel. Frozen mid-acceleration, like an insect caught in amber. Lyris felt her stomach twist as light patterns crawled across the transparent barrier, disassembling the Namathis layer by layer without a sound. Bulkheads dissolved into dust, consoles crumbled into grains of metal drifting into the void. She closed her eyes as the floor vanished beneath her feet. But instead of death, there was stillness. And then she opened her eyes to find herself standing on solid ground in an unfamiliar place. She stood inside a vast chamber filled with golden light. The walls curved endlessly around her, like the inside of a living star. Shapes moved in the brightness. Human silhouettes in sleek armor, their faces hidden behind clear visors. One stepped forward, speaking through the same calm voice. You were inside the path of consequence. We removed you to spare your lives. You must not attempt to enter again. Lyris tried to speak, to ask who they were and why they protected this place. But her voice cracked under the weight of the moment. The human turned slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his eyes, pale blue, yet filled with something that felt ancient. You mock our name, the human said, but the oath was written in pain. Not pride, we swore never to begin war again and never to let cruelty cross these stars. Your empire tested both, now you stand alive because mercy still matters. Among us, Lyris felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear but from the raw truth in his tone. She whispered that the Empire would never stop, and he answered softly, Then we will remind them until they do. In a flash, she was back aboard the Namathis, the ship restored though crippled, floating near the gate. Valor was gone, his seat empty. The rest of the crew stared at her as if she had returned from death. She barely managed to stand. The human voice came again through comms. This sector is closed. Return your survivors to Vera Prime. The gate will remain sealed. Failure to comply will end in silence forever. After the transmission ended, the Resolute turned slowly, drifting back toward the gate, its hull unfolding like wings, absorbing light before vanishing once more into the glow. When the fleet finally limped home, Rumors spread faster than ships themselves. Some said the humans had gods in their engines. Others whispered that they controlled gravity. With their minds, Lyris could not explain what she had seen. All she knew was that when the Terran captain looked at her, she felt something deeper than power. She felt sorrow, a mourning so vast it could swallow galaxies. The Empire prepared more fleets swearing vengeance, but soldiers began refusing orders. Too many had seen mercy stronger than violence and could no longer pretend it was weakness on Vera Prime. The civilians returned to rebuild the cities under the lingering watch of unseen drones that still patrolled the sky at night. The girl Rhea often asked Lyris if the humans would come back. Lyris always answered the same way: they never left, child. They are just waiting for us to stop needing saving. She looked up at the stars every evening, remembering the golden chamber and the human voice that carried both warning and forgiveness. She knew now that the Starborn Oath was not about borders. It was about restraint, about protecting others from becoming what the humans once were. And as she watched the horizon burn with dawn, she felt the first quiet hope that maybe even the Empire could learn from the legends it once mocked. The Empire could not accept what had happened. Its pride was too deep, its hunger for control too vast. Even after the Starborn Resolute vanished through the gate, Imperial broadcasts declared a call to arms, saying humanity had insulted their sovereignty, and that any who sympathized with the myths would be branded traitors. Fleets were rebuilt. Generals promoted propaganda flooded the channels, calling Terrans cowards who hid behind technology. Lyris sat in the briefing halls, listening to the same hollow words. But the soldiers' faces told a different story. Fear had replaced certainty, and whispers of the Starborn Oath spread through every rank like wildfire. Lyris had been ordered to return to the capital. But before departure, she visited the ruins of Vera Prime. The sky above was calm. Again, blue and endless. Yet the ground still bore the marks of the human landing drones hovered quietly over reconstruction sites, repairing what the Empire's own bombardments had destroyed. She found Rhea, the young girl from the first attack, now living with other orphans. Under the guidance of relief workers, the child smiled when she saw her clutching a small metallic shard engraved with 3 stars. Lyris recognized the Terran emblem. She asked where Rhea had found it. The girl said softly, "It fell from the sky after the big ship left, and that when she held it at night, she could hear faint whispers telling her not to be afraid." Lyris kept the shard and promised to return it one day to those who had dropped it. Her transport left for the capital 2 days later. Yet as soon as it reached orbit, it was redirected mid-course. Commander Velor had been found alive. His shuttle drifting near the boundary line, he had demanded an audience with the High Council, claiming he had discovered the weakness of the humans. Curiosity burned through the council chambers as Velor stood before them. Scarred but unbroken, his voice low and sharp. He told them he had seen what lay beyond the gate. A light so bright it blinded sensors. He said the humans guarded it because they feared others would learn its secret, an energy beyond anything the Empire could dream. He proposed to use the Empire's experimental rift engines to open that gate again and seize what the Terrans were hiding. Lyris stood at the edge of the chamber, wanting to speak, wanting to stop him. But silence weighed heavy on her heart. She knew no argument would reach men who mistook compassion for cowardice. The project was approved under the name Operation Dawnbreaker. Within weeks, construction began on massive reactors designed to tear open the Oath boundary. The Empire's propaganda declared it the beginning of a new golden age. Yet among the workers and lower officers, doubt grew. They remembered the fleet that never returned, and the ships that turned to dust. Lyris found herself drawn into secret meetings with those who feared what Velor was planning. They called themselves the Remnants, and their goal was simple: prevent the Empire from repeating its mistake, even if it meant betraying orders. As Operation Dawnbreaker neared completion, a strange silence settled across the border worlds. Ships reported seeing shadows in the clouds, voices whispering through their comms at night. Entire patrols vanished, leaving behind only faint blue light trails. Lyris realized the humans were watching again, waiting. She sent a coded message through abandoned frequencies, repeating one phrase: "The Oath is understood." The next morning, a reply came, not in text but in vision, a brief transmission of stars aligning into the symbol of the Oath, followed by a single voice saying one word: trust. When the day of the test came, the Empire gathered its grand fleet near the rift site, thousands of ships surrounding the colossal engines that glowed. With unnatural light, Lyra stood beside Valor on the control deck as Countdown began, the hum of energy growing until it shook her bones. She whispered a final plea for him to stop, but he ignored her, shouting that humanity's time was over. The reactors fired and the sky ripped apart for a heartbeat. Everything turned white. Then from the tear stepped a shadow larger than worlds. The Starborn Resolute returned, not alone, but surrounded by smaller Terran vessels, moving like a single organism. The air itself seemed to pulse with their arrival. All Empire systems collapsed in an instant. Lights died, engines silenced, the human broadcast filled every channel. Cease your attempt, or your fleets will vanish. Valor screamed defiance and tried to reignite the core, but the controls melted under a surge of invisible energy. Lyris pulled him away as the chamber trembled. The Terran ships positioned themselves above the engines, forming a lattice of light, and with one unified pulse they folded the entire rift structure into itself without an explosion, without a sound, leaving only drifting particles shining like snow as the fleet scattered in chaos. The Starborn broadcast came again, no longer calm but edged with grief. This is your last. Warning, the oath forbids vengeance, but it does not forbid memory. The voice faded, leaving silence broken only by the cries of broken pride. Lyris held the trembling child's shard in her hand, feeling it warm, as if responding to the message. She realized this was not victory or defeat. It was mercy once more. Mercy that would haunt the Empire more than destruction ever could. The silence that followed Operation Dawnbreaker was heavier than any battle Lyris had ever known across the Empire. Stars dimmed as entire communication relays went dark. The High Council called it interference, but soldiers whispered that the humans had shut the galaxy itself into mourning. The Starborn fleet did not stay visible. They vanished into the outer dark, yet their presence could be felt in the static hum across the networks and in the dreams of those who had seen the light. Lyris could not sleep for nights. She heard the same voice echoing through her mind, repeating one word: remember. Every time she woke, she found the shard glowing faintly on her desk, pulsing with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. She knew the Terrans were not done, and neither was the Empire. Commander Valor had survived again, though stripped of command he had become something worse, a prophet of vengeance. He gathered followers among the ambitious, promising them power beyond the oath. He claimed that deep in the archives, there was a code hidden within the old pre-expansion star maps, a path that led to the origin world of humanity. Earth, the forbidden cradle, he said. If they could strike at its heart, they could break the humans' resolve forever and take the secrets they guarded. Lyris heard of his plan through the remnants who had now gone underground, spreading warnings through hidden channels. She knew if Valor reached Earth, the Starborn would respond, and the galaxy would never recover. The Empire built a final armada under secrecy, naming it the Ascendant Strike. Over 1,000 ships forged with experimental stealth cores designed to resist Terran interference. Lyris infiltrated the command deck under false orders with help from the remnants, posing as an envoy. Once again, she watched as Valor addressed his crews. Eyes blazing with madness, he declared that the humans had shamed the Empire for the last time and that history would remember this night as the end of the Terran myth. When the fleet departed, the stars bent around them, the engines tearing through forbidden space toward the coordinates. No map dared to show days passed without incident. Then on the fourth day, the first signs appeared. Sensors flickered, showing phantom readings. The void around them began to shimmer as if unseen currents moved through it. Ships began reporting strange phenomena, clocks running backward, whispers through hull metal shadows walking across observation windows. When they emerged from warp, the fleet found themselves above a dead system, orbiting a pale blue world, shattered into fragments like glass. Hanging in a sea of dust, the crews gasped, thinking Earth was gone. Valor smiled, saying the humans had destroyed their own cradle, and were nothing more than ghosts. But Lyris felt cold dread fill her chest. Something about the fragments felt wrong, too symmetrical, too deliberate. Then the fragments began to move, each one rotating slowly, revealing hidden structures, vast rings of metal wrapped around hollow cores, artificial moons. Awakening from dormancy, the Terrans had not destroyed their home. They had turned it into a fortress, and within that fortress the Starborn fleet waited. The Resolute appeared again at the center, its hull brighter than before, symbols flowing. Across it, like living code, the human broadcast came through the Empire's own systems. You have crossed into the cradle of the oath, leave now, and no harm will come to your people. Disobey and this sector will be sealed forever. Valor ordered all ships to attack, his voice breaking into hysterical laughter. He shouted that no oath, no myth could stop progress, and that he would burn the cradle to ash. The first barrage of missiles launched, but halfway through flight they bent away, following invisible magnetic paths, and turned back toward the Empire ships. Lyra screamed for them to stop, but it was too late. Explosions tore through the formation, lighting the void with silent fire. She rushed to override the systems, but the controls ignored every command. Then across the darkness the Starborn moved, engines glowing with cold fire. They did not fire beams or missiles, they simply drifted forward, and every Empire ship that came near them powered down, falling still like metal statues. Resolute approached Valor's flagship. The bridge flooded with blinding light, a voice filled every speaker, calm, but filled with sorrow. You were warned again and again, we did not wish for this. You seek our cradle, yet you do not see what we protect. Valor raised his weapon and fired at the console, screaming that he would never bow to ghosts. The shot evaporated mid-air. The light from the Resolute engulfed him, and when it faded he was gone, leaving only his uniform lying empty on the floor. The remaining ships began to retreat on their own systems, obeying human commands, overriding Imperial code. Lyris felt her ship turning away from the cradle, engines moving without pilot control. Through the comms, the Terran voice spoke once more. Your Empire may rebuild, but it will never find this place again. The path is closed. The oath stands. She looked through the viewport one last time and saw the fragments of Earth closing together, forming a single sphere of light, as if the planet was healing itself. And she realized the humans had turned their home into a living memory, a reminder of what pride could destroy and what mercy could preserve forever. When the light of the Terran cradle finally faded behind them, the Empire fleet drifted in silence, their engines dead, their pride gone. Lyra stood among the survivors in the ruined command deck, her uniform torn, her face illuminated by the faint glow of emergency lights. She looked at the stars through the shattered viewport and realized that the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had not fought for conquest. They had fought for peace, a kind of peace so absolute that it frightened those who thrived on domination. The surviving captains spoke in whispers. None dared mention Commander Valor's name. It was as if he had never existed. His ship had been erased from the records and from memory itself. For days, the crippled armada floated between systems until the Starborn Resolute appeared one final time, gliding beside them, silent. As a shadow, it did not open fire, it did not demand surrender. It simply sent a single transmission coordinates to safe space, and a message written in both Terran and Imperial language: return to your people, and tell them this: we will not seek vengeance. But the stars remember everything. The words burned into every mind that heard them. Lyris watched as the great ship turned away, its hull unfolding like wings, the light from its engines stretching into infinity, and then it vanished, leaving behind trails of silver dust that sparkled like tears in the dark. When the survivors finally returned to the Empire, their arrival was met with disbelief and anger. The High Council demanded explanations and proof of human treachery. But the recordings showed no battle, no victory. Only silent sensors captured the moment the fleet froze. Weapons inactive, engines cold. The Council refused to believe that the Terrans had spared them. They called it sabotage, a trick of human illusion. They ordered all data related to the Starborn incident destroyed and declared Lyris and the others enemies of the state. She was stripped of her title, imprisoned in the capital beneath the marble halls that once echoed with her pride. In the cold of her cell, she thought of Rhea, the little girl who had smiled beneath the falling drones. She thought of the human captain whose calm voice had filled her mind, and of the golden chamber she had glimpsed where mercy was stronger than power. Weeks passed, months, blurred together until one night her cell door opened without a sound and a soft light filled the corridor. A familiar figure stood there, cloaked in gray eyes bright as starlight. It was Rhea, now older, wearing an insignia that glowed faintly with 3 stars, the mark of the oath. She whispered that the Terrans had reached out again, not to conquer but to offer a choice. The humans had sent envoys across the border to those willing to listen, offering guidance, not rule. They would share knowledge of rebuilding worlds and restoring life, but only with those who renounced the Empire's hunger for control. Rhea told her that small colonies on the frontier had already accepted the offer, and that peace zones were forming under the watch of invisible starborn ships. Lyris felt her chest tighten. She had believed she would die forgotten. Yet here was proof that the story was not over. She followed Rhea through the corridors of the silent prison until they reached a landing bay where an unmarked shuttle waited, hovering in quiet readiness. As the shuttle rose through the atmosphere, Lyris saw the capital below, once gleaming, now fractured by riots and storms. The Empire was collapsing under its own lies without enemies to fight. It turned upon itself. Rhea looked at her and said softly, "They are not our enemies. They are our reflection, and the Terrans want us to see that." When the shuttle broke free into space, Lyris saw it there, waiting above the clouds, the Starborn Resolute. Majestic and terrible, yet beautiful in its silence, she felt no fear, only awe as they approached the docking bay. The human voice returned, speaking directly into her thoughts. "Welcome back, envoy of Vera. The Oath remembers those who choose truth over power." Inside the ship, the corridors glowed with living light, every surface breathing softly like the inside of a great heart. She walked alongside Rhea, who now moved with purpose, as if she belonged here. In one vast chamber, humans stood beside other species beings Lyris had never seen, all speaking in calm voices, all working together. At the center of the room, a large sphere of blue energy floated, suspended by thin arcs of light. The Terran captain appeared beside it, tall, silent eyes, filled with both sorrow and peace. He told her that the Oath was not a weapon. It was a promise, a vow taken after a war that nearly erased all life. Humans had turned away from Empire, not because they were weak, but because they had learned the cost of victory. He placed the shard she had carried since Vera Prime back into her hands and said, "This belonged to those who first swore the oath. Now it belongs to you." Lyris felt warmth spread through her body as the shard glowed brighter, merging. With her pulse, she asked what would become of her people. And he replied that every species must decide whether to live by conquest or by conscience. But the Oath would always stand watch over the stars, until none needed to fear another. Years passed. The Empire faded into history, its fragments scattered among independent worlds where humans and aliens rebuilt side by side. Stories of the Starborn became songs, sung to children about the day. Mercy defeated pride, and among them, one name was always remembered: Lyris of Vera Prime, the envoy who saw the truth and carried the first new oath of peace. When she looked to the night sky, she sometimes saw a faint silver trail moving slowly across the dark, and she smiled, knowing the Starborn were still out there watching, guiding, reminding the galaxy that legends were never lies. They were warnings written in light. The galaxy had entered a new age, but no one could truly say when the war had ended. Perhaps it never had. Perhaps it had simply changed shape and found peace instead of battle songs. Lyris stood on the balcony of a rebuilt city on Vera Prime, the same world where the legends had begun. The wind carried the scent of rain and iron, the sky clear and full of stars. The Empire was gone, only fragments remained scattered among worlds now free to choose their own path. She watched children playing beneath banners of blue and white marked with the sign of 3 stars, the same symbol that had once glowed on the hull of the Starborn Resolute. Now it was a mark of unity, a promise that no species would ever again cross the oath for greed or pride. Rhea stood beside her, now grown and wearing the uniform of the new Alliance Council, her voice calm but strong. She said, "The humans have left again into the deep void. Their ships move beyond our reach, but they promise to return when the stars grow dark once more." Lyris nodded, feeling both pride and sorrow. She knew humanity had never sought dominion. They were guardians bound by a vow older than any empire. The oath had become more than a legend. It was a law written into the conscience of every living being that remembered what happened when arrogance tried to test compassion. At night, Lyris would still wake sometimes, hearing that human voice inside her mind, the one that had spoken across battlefields and through silence. It would say the same words again. Remember mercy before power. Remember life before victory. And when she opened her eyes, she always saw that faint silver shimmer tracing across the horizon, a sign that the Starborn were still watching, still guiding from the unseen edge of the known stars. The Alliance thrived, slowly building bridges between worlds. Once enemy soldiers became explorers' weapons turned into machines of creation, and across the void the name Terran no longer inspired fear but respect. Scholars searched for traces of the old Earth, the cradle of the Oath, but found only empty light where it once had been, they said. The humans had hidden it so deeply that no one could ever find it until they were ready, until the galaxy learned to live without war, Lyris believed. That was true because she had seen their power, she had seen how they used mercy like a blade sharper than any weapon. Years turned into decades. Rhea became a leader, her voice echoing through the council halls, reminding all that peace was not a gift, it was a duty. Lyris grew older, her hair silver like the glow of the distant stars. She spent her days teaching children about what the Oath meant and how legends were not made of glory, but of choice, and she told them of the night when a human warship appeared in the sky above Vera and spoke softly instead of striking, and how that single act changed the course of the galaxy forever. One evening, as the sun set low over the plains, a light appeared far above, brighter than any star, moving slow and graceful across the heavens. People looked up, pointing in wonder, and Lyris smiled, knowing what it was, the resolute returning for a moment to look upon the worlds it had once saved. Her heart filled with peace as she whispered, "Thank you," across the wind, her voice trembling but clear. The light faded into the horizon and she closed her eyes, content, knowing that the Oath would endure long after her story was forgotten. The legends of humanity lived on, not as fearsome tales but as reminders that strength without compassion leads only to ruin, that mercy can shape empires, that kindness can outlast time. And though no one ever saw the Starborn again, the stars themselves seemed to burn a little brighter, carrying their promise across eternity. And so the story of the Starborn Oath ended, not with destruction, not with conquest, but with silence and hope, the kind of hope that only comes when a galaxy finally learns to listen to its own heart. The end.